The Middle East has a new story to tell, and this is From MENA to the World. And I'm your host, Amir Farha. I've been investing in startups since 2005. More recently, I co-founded Beko Capital, and now Co2 Ventures, a seed-stage VC focused on investing in incredible founders in the Middle East at the earliest stages of their journeys. I've been involved in backing extraordinary companies founded by amazing people. And over the years of investing, I've found that I love understanding the human side to entrepreneurship. I love hearing the stories from people that faced and surmounted huge challenges. And I love championing underdogs who are against the odds of success. For the longest time, the MENA region has been misunderstood. Today, we are creating a new narrative, a new voice that harnesses our strengths and is a driver of our future. The Middle East has a new story to tell, and this is From MENA to the World. On today's show, we'd like to welcome Kamal Reggad, founder of RemotePass, a platform that manages remote workers across the region. Kamal is a serial entrepreneur who's gone through many highs and lows during his time founding companies. His father is his biggest source of inspiration, and his journey is full of many takeaways for anyone starting a business. We hope you enjoy the show. Kamal, thanks for joining us. I'm going to start by just asking you straight away, who is Kamal? Where is he from? And a bit about your family and upbringing would be great. Let's start there.
Well, thank you for having me, Amir. Really excited to be here. Basically, I grew up in Morocco, born and raised in Morocco, in a city called Oujda in the northeast, close to the borders with Algeria. So grew up there with two sisters. And my dad was an engineer and turned into an entrepreneur. And my mom was a teacher. I grew up in this small town called Oujda until the age of 17. And after that, I went to Boston for college. That's where I did my bachelor's in computer science and math, and then master's in computer science as well.
Okay. This is exciting. So you were were you the firstborn in the family?
Yeah, firstborn. And there is actually a 10-year difference between myself and my sister.
And then the other sister is obviously younger than that, right?
Exactly.
So you were kind of alone for most of your, half of your childhood.
Yeah, absolutely. Till the age of 10. So I was, by myself.
Yeah, and you said your dad was an engineer turned entrepreneur. Did he turn entrepreneur while you were growing up? Was it, did you see that change, or was he an engineer and then later on in his life?
Yeah, so my dad is a chemical engineer. So basically he was working for a cement company called Holcim. And he always wanted, I remember weekends we would, so he's a chemical engineer, so he loves mountains and rocks. And then I remember when we were young and I was young and he would tell me what this rock is made of and what substance you can extract from this and what substance you can extract from that. And I had no interest in that. But you could see that he was so passionate. I think almost every weekend, we would take an hour to go outside the city and then go to these mountains, these areas where there are some valuable assets in these mountains. And he would talk to me about them. And yeah, of course, I remember those trips. And I could feel that he always wanted to do something, to build something. But for a long time, he kept his job. And it wasn't until my freshman year in the US that he decided to leave his job and start his company. And I thought that was a little bit crazy. I'm like, okay, Dad, you could have picked a better time. So I'm going to the US and you know how much the tuition is and all of that. And then you decide to to change lives. So yeah, that was really interesting. And I really admire him a lot for that. And I always question, why would you do that at that age, at that specific moment? Because most of the time,
how old was he? Sorry.
At the time, he was, I think, 48 or 49.
So, later in his career, yeah.
Yeah, at this specific time. And I'm like, okay, why would you do this at this time? You had 48 years to do it. Why now? And but he just said, okay, it feels like it's the right time to do it. If I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. This is what I want to do. And then I saw him start the company from from zero. And then I remember his job was so demanding, like he was always traveling. And before he turned into an entrepreneur, so he traveled the world, like every single month he's in some, like all over the place. So sometimes you don't even know where he is. And yes, suddenly he has to stop, and it's a Swiss company, so everything is in order, and basically
organized.
you change all of that, and especially in ecosystem in Morocco. So basically, you're going to live multinational, where everything is structured, where you have a great career, great benefits, and where you spent like over 20 years, where you spent your past 20 years, and then you suddenly move to something else and start from scratch. And yeah, so first-time entrepreneur.
What a role model, I guess. You were
It's
starting
really
your
impressive.
you were starting your, let's say, quarter life, because you're like probably graduating from university, thinking about what to do next, and your dad at that point had just is in the beginnings of being an entrepreneur. So you're seeing that change. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And did you find any, like, I guess growing up as the only son, but also the eldest in the family, was there anything there that any like I wouldn't say beliefs or behaviors that you built that maybe suited the entrepreneurial life or today that you think really conditioned you in a good way to actually become a founder?
Since I remember, I always wanted to do something of, like, I wanted to build something. Even when I was young, I would buy and sell stuff. Even at school, I remember at one point, every time I go to Morocco, like my mom would bring this up, and we would laugh about it, how I only liked sweets when I was young, just like any other kid. But suddenly one day I'm like, okay, mom, can you make me like a sandwich with slices of turkey and all of that? And she found that weird. And moms, like they know everything. Like any change in your behavior, they would detect it. So the first time was fine. The next day I'm like, yeah, mom, can I have the same sandwich again? And then she asked me, okay, are you really eating the sandwich? You don't even eat at home. Like, and later she came to ask around, and she found out that I was selling slices per piece. Like I was like 1 dirham a piece. So, and I would take that money to buy sweets.
Oh man!
So yeah, like she would bring this up every time I'm back in Morocco. We're sitting with the family. It's one of those stories.
Initially, when she caught you, was it like a funny moment, or was it like a, like how are you? Why are you?
It was funny.
Yeah, okay,
it was
good.
funny. I mean,
I think it's funny. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
It was a funny moment.
Morocco is obviously, I'm sure it's an amazing place to grow up and have your childhood, just generally. But I'm curious from a culture perspective, entrepreneurship, at least in the Arab world, if I don't want to generalize, has had its issues, from a culture, acceptance and fear of failure and all these things were quite big. But did you notice that growing up, or was it just like your family were very much encouraging you to go and create and build?
My dad, he was always pushing me to follow my passion. Like he's the most passionate person about like what he does. And I have no interest in his industry. So he's very passionate about it. And I remember at one point, I'm like, okay, Dad, like, why don't you invest in real estate? And like back in early 2000s, and real estate was booming and everyone was making money, and you hear these stories. And I kept asking him, and at one point, he's like, seriously, that's not what I do. And that was like there was discussion I still remember now. Like, it's if I'm doing this, I'm doing it because I'm passionate about it. I'm not just doing it for the money. Of course, you have to make a living. You have a family to provide for, but you can do it even with following your passion and not being distracted with everything else. Whenever there is an opportunity, you would jump on it and stuff like that. So yeah, my dad had played a role into what I've become today, and with the courage that I have today, and my decision to get into entrepreneurship. My mom, she's the opposite. She's risk averse, and she wants things to be predictable, and she doesn't want to take too much risk. So she's always pushing towards the other side. So yeah,
which is a nice balance.
It's a nice balance, exactly.
Yeah, I guess then walk me through what made you choose Boston and computer science, because obviously, like, I'm assuming you grew up till your teenage years.
Yeah.
In Morocco. I'm assuming some of your friends stayed there. Some of your friends went to maybe France or other parts to study. Just curious how you made that decision. Was it an easy choice? You knew you want to be a computer scientist?
Well, I mean, at school I was good in certain things and really bad at other things. So, I mean, education in Morocco is very different than the American education. So basically, there is a lot of things where you have a lot of classes where you have to memorize everything. and I was unable to do that. So I was always distracted. I cannot focus for too long, especially if I'm not interested in something. It's like history. I had no interest in history, so I could never memorize like what happens in class or what I was reading, and I could not read. I was dyslexic, so I could not read. Like I had trouble reading. So, but the good thing, I discovered one day that I was good at math. Finally, someone is praising me for something. Like all I could hear that you need to improve this, you need to improve that. But I was good at math and I built an interest in math and physics. I was really good at those things and really bad at everything else. Like even Arabic language, I was really bad at it. Like for me, if I do something, it has to be on the math side because I will not succeed if I do anything else. Business for me was tough. Like business major was something that's hard. You have to memorize. Computer science was like the perfect fit for me. And when I was growing up, like I had big passion for like electronics and games and consoles and all of that. I would take them apart, put them back. At the time, I thought if I have a chance in life, it would be in computer science. Anything else, I would just fail. I was working, I think, since my year 2 in college. I was working in labs. And the good thing, at first, I went to BU, Boston University. And then I transferred to Northeastern because Northeastern, there was a lot of hype. The founder of Napster was at Northeastern, and there was some buzz around computer science. And the good thing is that they have this 5-year program. So you have the first 2 years, you take classes, and then you do 6 months on, 6 months off. So co-op programs. So you work for 6 months, and then you study for 6 months. But the entire bachelor's degree is 5 years. So I transferred to Northeastern. Since then, I've been working, like if I'm not on co-op, I would be working in the lab or library or...
So your work ethic was high up front, huh? You were really like, that was a big part of your lifestyle when you went to university. It was much more work hard. Just curious, did you explore other things?
I mean, I realized that I can make extra cash by working. I never put too much effort into studying. Like when I was in college, I never remember myself like studying for 2 weeks straight for a final exam or anything like that. I mean, especially in computer science, if you are in, so you just get it and you don't have to work a lot. And and I would take a job at the lab. So basically the job at the lab, you're not doing much. So you're just sitting there. So during that time, I do my homework if I have any or prepare for an exam. And I had a really good time in college. And just,
well, you also, so I guess, making money was a part of your earlier years. So then what when you graduated, what was next? Did you go back to Morocco?
No, I stayed. So the first job, it was at a research center at Harvard University. So that was where I started. After that, I worked for a startup. So they were doing mobile apps back in 2004. And that was a lot of fun. So I was employee number 3. And it was a lot of fun. And I worked for that company until that company decided to relocate to Latin America. And after that, I said, okay, there was a lot of buzz about management consulting, and I decided to go for my master's. And I got a job at LEK Consulting, lasted for 3 months, not even, and I just had to leave. I just could not take it. I hated my life. I think that was my worst experience. It's a great company and everything, but it was just not for me. I never lasted more than a year and a half at a job until my last experience in 2007. From LEK, I worked for a hedge fund, later for a consulting company, and then I landed at this company called Spotfire, so which is an analytics tool, and it was a startup, and I started working there.
In the US?
In the US still, and it was a lot of fun. That was like my best professional experience. It was fun. And it helped me discover myself, what I like about, how come I cannot last for more than a year at a job? So
what did you discover?
I discovered that I like to be part of the inception of something. So like the early stage, I want to build, I want to be part of that foundation that builds a product. And I found that at Spotfire. So at Spotfire, I was hired as a consultant, and then I got a full-time job with them. And the first job was something completely different than what I'm doing right now. So it was basically building data centers. So basically disaster recovery sites and building everything from scratch. So when I was hired, it was okay, now we need to build our disaster recovery site, and then we need to make sure that everything is synced in real time. And in case some disaster happens to our office, we need to be live within 20 minutes. Everything needs to be operational and such. That was an amazing project too, because I knew a lot of pieces of that, but I was never involved like from scratch. Like so I would get involved in discussions in choosing the data center where we're gonna host our servers and everything. Like I would get involved even into the cooling system. So you really learn a lot. And when you work for a company that trusts you, and when you have a manager that gives you like full access to do whatever you need to complete the job, that
fully
was
empowered,
amazing.
basically.
Exactly. And after that project ended, I got bored and I started coding. So it's something completely different. But the company was a lot of fun, and the founder was just amazingly smart guy. With that time, like the company got acquired, and I ended up working on something completely different. And the software that they sold as a standalone, like it's something that you install on servers internally. So the project I was working on is how can we make sure that the product, because like the product, when you want to buy it, so you want to try it. So every time a customer needs to try it, they would install a server for them in-house, and they would install the software and give them access. And the project that I worked on, how can we make this web-based? Like, how can we get people to try it easily? This is back in 2008, 2009, 2010. So I worked on that project, and I saw it go live, and it's still live now, and that was amazing. So when the company got acquired, I made some money. I'm like, okay, what do I do?
You had stock options. That's great.
Yeah.
Not very common for most people from this part of the world. That's amazing, dude.
I mean, honestly, like I didn't know what stock options were.
Yeah.
So, and especially like when I started at this company, it was 2007. So with recession, it doesn't mean anything. So if you have stock options, nobody is doing well. But things picked up really well. And then the company got acquired, and then our stock options got converted into shares. I never looked how many shares I had, how much my stock options are worth, until like things start picking up pretty well, and everyone was talking around the office about, did you see the stock, and following the stock market. And I looked, and I had some decent amount, and I'm like, okay, so now I either put it as a down payment on a house or do something else. So I did something else.
This brings us to your first startup.
So with my first startup,
but you moved to Morocco. Or not yet?
Not yet.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
So basically, it was, like after I was following the news and the ecosystem in the region, and that was the time where Maktub got acquired. And I remember receiving emails from people that I know, like even the founder of Spotfire, he would send me an email that cool things are, it's nice to see some activity in your region. And I'm like, okay, so it's possible. So things can happen in our region, so we're not different. So it got me some motivation to do something, but I didn't want to move to Morocco. So I liked my life in the US, and I said, okay, like maybe in 2-3 years, and just push it for a few more years. I said, okay, let me try something while I'm full-time, still working. Let me try something. So what I've done, I was looking at different ideas, and one of them was daily deals. So it was like everyone was talking about Groupon and how cool it is. And I thought, that's an amazing idea. And I had a friend who worked at Groupon, and he was in charge of launching Boston. And he was telling me about how this cool company is and the traction they've been having. And I'm like, this is perfect. Not only the concept is great, but it's perfect for a market that doesn't know e-commerce. Back then, there was zero e-commerce in Morocco. Nobody has ever bought anything online in Morocco. So I'm like, okay, this is great because tickets are low. So we're not selling phones or computers. Tickets are low. Maybe we could start with sandwiches and stuff. But so basically, I went to Morocco, and I hired 2 people. One was full-time and one part-time. And the full-time, like, had no experience in sales. So I was just tell her what to do, like how to sell the product, and I'm not even a salesperson. So it was amazing. Like it really happened like so fast, you cannot imagine. Like we started discussions over the summer. I was busy at work until November 2010. I go to Morocco to hire these 2 people, and I met someone, an entrepreneur. So I'm sitting down with him and he's like, yeah, he knows me like since I was young. And he was telling me, when do you plan to come to Morocco? I'm like, I'm thinking about it and I'm starting this company. And he's like, okay, what are you thinking of? And I start talking to him about like the success Groupon is having. And I think this is the best thing for Morocco and we're no different and things are going to pick up. And e-commerce is the future. And like I was just talking nonstop. And then at the end, he's like, well, if you need any help, let me know. I'm like, okay, you're in real estate. Like why would you want to be involved
he was in real estate.
Yeah, he's like, well, I do have an advertising firm. So like it's number 2 billboard company in Morocco. So I'm like, okay, I was just joking. I told him, well, if you give me free access to your billboards around Morocco, I'll give you 50% of the company. And he's like, yeah, let's do it. So that put more pressure on me. And I'm like, okay, now I'm just going to hire these 2 people. So I'm just going to hire them.
And you did the deal. You did the 50-50.
Yeah.
Wow.
Before we didn't even have there was no company.
No company even, yeah.
There's no company, no name. Like we didn't even have a name or a date or so anything.
He was a co-founder technically, right?
Yeah. I mean, he contributed with sweat equity.
Yeah.
And and I went back to Boston. I worked on a website. And
you coded it yourself?
Yeah, did everything myself, website, marketing material, like every single thing, like from setting up email and everything.
This is all moonlighting while working, basically.
Yeah, and I told my boss that I want to leave. I want to explore this, and I'm still going to be in the US. If you had a part-time job for me, I'll take it, but I cannot work full-time. And I remember we launched on January 21st, 2011. I think the first deal was a sandwich for $4 instead of $8. And then the guy, he stopped answering the phone.
Oh, man.
So, yeah.
So you had a deal with the sandwich guy, you mean the sandwich?
Yeah, this fast food. And then the guy stopped responding, so we could not launch. And then we found a hotel that gave us a 20 or 30% discount on rooms. So we launched that instead. So quickly we ramped up everything. And the good thing is that the company, we had people that write content. We had people that did graphics, like one person in France that was doing content. Everything was remote, like on Upwork, I think, or Odesk back in the days. We had everything. We launched and it was okay, the first offer. And then the second offer was okay. And then I remember March 3rd, we launched an offer and then we sell 700 coupons. And the offer was a massage. You have 700 people calling, wanting to get the massage right away, all at the same time. No patience, nothing.
Oh, of course.
and the entire process was manual, so you could imagine. So at that time I said, it's impossible I was doing customer support. So it was impossible to do
handle these calls.
Handle these emails and everything. So I'm going to go to Morocco for a week. So I went to Morocco and I stayed.
What an amazing story. Honestly, I think the journey, it sounds like, was like a serendipitous one. It just happened in those moments and you ended up landing into Morocco and not turning back. What happened? Like, what was the next few years there? Like, obviously, what are the learnings? I'm sure there were ups and downs, right? Daily deal sites at the time were a real craze. And obviously, as you know, they went through their own tough time. What are the memories that you have of that process, and what happened to Mehmezadeh in the end?
The following years were great. I think the first until 2014 was amazing. Like we had an amazing growth, and this company that was bootstrapped. And I invested most of my savings and stock option money into the company. I was not taking a salary for the first 3 years. But we got it to a point where it was becoming profitable. Back then, a daily deal site that is profitable, it's unheard of.
Yeah.
But what helped us a lot is first the market that didn't have any competition, like the first year or so. And second is the marketing campaign that we did offline. It was, I think, in 2014, it won the best brand in Morocco or something like that. It was a household brand. The company kept growing until certain point where daily deals stopped growing, and we started to look at where can we expand. When you look at Morocco, it's attractive. It's next to you have Algeria, which is a great country, but unfortunately we cannot do business there. It's an isolated country, so you can't. There is nowhere to expand. If you go to Africa, we're in Africa. But if you go south, it's a completely different animal. Like it's nothing like Morocco, North Africa and South. It's just two different things. It kept growing until a point we plateaued. At one point, we could not raise funding because nobody was interested. None of the investors I was talking to was interested in Morocco. Simply, they said that the market size is not interesting and expansion, it's a question mark. So we were not able to raise funding. And basically, we ended up selling the company to a local holding company. So basically, the platform, the Mizat is still active.
Amazing.
And yeah.
But tell me, like, for you, the learnings there, I guess building a brand sounds like you learned building brand equity, at least for a startup looks like, and then obviously challenges with fundraising, and then the fact that Morocco has, I'm sure, infrastructure issues and that had difficulty scaling this thing. Now you've obviously gone to start another company, and I'm sure, what learnings have you taken, or what perspective did you bring to this new journey? SufferPass first, then RemotePass. We'll talk about the transition there, but to looking at SufferPass and saying, okay, this is something I want to again go all in on, and I believe in it. Like, I'm sure your history has taught you a lot in that prospect, in that decision making.
One of the first things is pick a market. So this is one of the first things that I learned. If I'm trying to do something, I might as well do research on the market. How big is the market? Regardless of competition, first you need to make sure that the market is big enough to absorb you and competition. And so that is why, like, on the next venture, we picked business travel, not leisure travel. And second is the team. I mean, in my previous company, we didn't have a clear strategy on talent and bring in the right people. So it was basically on an ad hoc basis. So basically, we need one more support person. We just bring in one junior person, and then the next, and then the third, the fourth, and then decisions are centralized. Bring in the right talent to help you grow much faster. It's something that I've learned the hard way. These two things that I can think of right now.
What was the hardest moment for you in your last startup? Like in Mizadeh, what was the hardest moment in that journey?
One of the hardest things first, I was a solo founder. That was really, really tough. I remember, like, from year one, I swore never to do anything ever alone, because sometimes you just want to vent. You just want to talk. I mean, you cannot talk to your team. You might scare them away, especially like they have options, but they follow you because you have vision and you're a dreamer and you have this big plans. Having a co-founder is like, for me, it was like, if I'm doing something again, and the first thing I need to find the right person to partner with to build something together. And yeah, like one of the toughest moments, I would say, like towards the end, it was fundraising. Another moment was like sometime in 2015. And I think this moment hurt the company a lot. When I started the company, I registered the name. And when I registered the trademark, registered the name in French, because that's what you do. I mean, the domain name is in French. So I thought, okay, let's just register it in French. So I did it myself. And in 2015, like, this company sued us and they won because they registered the same name, but in Arabic. But this company did not exist. So, I mean, it's just these two guys who are experts on brands and trademarks. So they just registered our name, Mizat, but in Arabic, and they called it Al Umaizat. So they sued us. That was a horrible moment because, like, I've never been to court in my life. And then I started going to court every day just to understand what's going on. I had to hire 3 lawyers, and I had to deal with the panic in and at the time, like, I think the team, we were about 60 or 65 people. And then, like, you have suppliers, clients, everyone is asking for refunds. Suppliers, they don't want to work with you. So that was a really tough moment for us.
So I've known you for a while, Kamal, and I really respect you as a founder. The journey, you can tell, even those ones, like the scars and wounds you've had in that Mezade journey, sounds really like admirable that you made it through, regardless of that outcome of selling it to a holding company, which is great because it's still alive, but it's maybe not necessarily what you set out to do. Same thing with SufferPass, right? You do business travel, and I remember we had a call in January last year, and I'm like, there's this thing called the coronavirus. What do you think of coronavirus? You're like, what? What's this coronavirus? And then, I mean, you can tell us the story there, but like, it was like a span of like a week. You're like, oh man, this is like serious. stuff. I would love you to shed more light here, but the way you went about monitoring it and then dealing with a pivot and really thinking about that, I think is really admirable. Again, like really impressive. So yeah, maybe walk us through your moments there, because that must be like I mean, I'm sitting there as an observer and I was, nervous for you. So I can't imagine what it was like being in the driver's seat.
With RemotePass, we were super excited how things were evolving, seeing growth month on month. You're swimming in a market that's valued at $1.5 trillion globally. Yeah. And the customers love our product. We're onboarding clients on a weekly basis. Everything is good, moving to the right directions. We're already thinking about our next funding round. And then I started hearing about coronavirus, but it's in the background. So I don't read the news much. And I remember calling you at one point. I'm like, it's funny, like, I'm not sure like why sales bookings are down a little bit this week. And we were like monitoring it day by day. And you were saying, man, have you been reading the news? COVID. And then we start talking about epidemic, pandemic, and what's the difference and all of that. But no, never in my life I would have imagined such a thing. And then rapidly things picked up from there. And then, like within a week, we started seeing travel bans within companies, and we kept talking to clients. And I mean, honestly, like at first we thought maybe something is wrong with the product. Maybe they don't like the latest updates, because we were releasing updates every 2-3 days. And most companies, they said, no, it's just that travels are being canceled and postponed because there is this scare around this virus. But never have I thought that it could end up being this bad. I think it was, when we talked, it was the last week of February. Yeah. And 2 weeks after, we saw our numbers go down to zero. So it was horrible. It's, you see all numbers go down to zero, but your team is still busy. Like, we're super busy. Like, we don't have time. Like, we're supporting clients, but zero revenue, zero sales, zero bookings. But you're busy. Like, from the minute you wake up, you're helping the support team, and everyone started doing support and mainly managing cancellations, refunds, and all of those things. After that, it was phases. So basically, it was a phase like when you live in denial. So you still think, okay, this is temporary. It might go away and you read in the news and you're looking at the signs, and it's not temporary. Yeah. But it's just unbelievable. So you don't accept it quickly. But at one point, I remember I just saw a video of this guy who's just putting things in simple words. Travel is not coming back in the next 12 months, even if there is the vaccine. And he brings up like good arguments, easy to understand, and it just made perfect sense. I'm like, okay, how come I didn't pick that up? And then, we started accepting the way things are. At the time, we had like spent a lot of efforts building a team, and we have a great tech talent. It is the first time as an entrepreneur that you have time to try things, and most of the time you don't have enough time to do things. Travel is not coming back for the next 12, 18 months, okay? What are we going to do for 12 months? So let's make the best use of our time and the team that we worked so hard to bring together and build something. So we did some design sprints, and that kept us busy for a week. And it was really impressive. Like, it was really impressive to see the motivation of the team and how everything like got together and stayed busy. And usually in design sprints, you build a prototype that just the UX, how the flow works, and see what people think of it. And we said, okay, design sprints are usually 4 or 5 days. We're going to do a week. We're going to do our own design sprints. But in a week, we're going to build a real product that you can test with real users. That was insane. Like, we worked day and night. Everyone worked like nonstop the entire week. And in Morocco, we had like tech team, and it was locked down. So basically everyone was home. And over 4 weeks, we built 4 products. We tested them, and then one of the products was RemotePass, and we decided to stick with it.
Yeah. I mean, I remember those days when you showed us the presentations. I was blown away by the speed at which you pivoted, because it was not even pivoted, it's a restart. You started from scratch again, like you're saying. in a space that obviously today remote work is becoming a very big theme given Corona and stuff. So it's interesting. And you kept SufferPass. So hopefully travel does come back. There may be something exciting there as well. Man, what a journey. I don't know where to start with these questions, but I guess, like, I think we had talked offline about, like, I'd love to, given that you've had, fundraising for your first startup and now you have this second startup, and I think, you're obviously going to go through many fundraisers. I think we were just discussing offline some interesting strategies that you have around how you approach it that I think is quite unique and a perspective that I think a lot of founders would want to learn from. Maybe walk me through, like, how you prepare for a typical fundraise now, because this is something that I think you're dealing with as we speak today, right?
Yes, I mean, the way we prepare for it, it's different this time, and we've learned a lot, because fundraising is not a fun task to do,
Yeah.
especially when you're passionate about product and you prefer to spend your time working on the product and finding the right people to join your company and build something great. It's not a waste of time, but it's time consuming. It's time spent outside of business. It's again, it has its emotional roller coaster on the sideline. So basically, what we've decided to do this time is to condense the time to speak to investors. At first, we were approached by few investors and we started discussions. These investors were long shots. The idea was really to talk to the first 2-3 investors just to train your pitch, to see if they understand what you're doing, because you're in it 24/7. For you, everything makes sense. But when you're talking to someone who does not know much about compliance or remote work or what you do, the difference between full-time employment and contractor, so how can you put it in simple words so that anybody can understand and you don't waste half an hour explaining all the details? So that was the strategy, is really to perfect the pitch, make it really in simple words.
Yeah, this I want to hold on this one, because what I appreciate about this, and as an investor, when I see pitches that are well articulated, especially from the founder's mouth, which tells me that they've built depth in their understanding of the business, and they're able to translate it in such simple terms, is a really strong quality that not many founders take the time to do, right? So there is a lot of heavy lifting up front to really get there by testing your pitch. I think you mentioned you take 3 or 4 points that you hone in on that are essential. We talked about that offline, but maybe you can spend time, formulating that strategy, because I feel like that's the unique part of this pitch. Obviously, fundraising, everyone has to go talk to many investors, but it's really like, what I appreciate about our conversation was that you were saying, I make sure I articulate the business in such a simple way that anyone could understand it, but specific points that are really relevant to the pitch.
The first part is making it simple, in simple words that anybody can understand. Whether you're technical or not technical, whether you're an expert in the subject or not, anybody would understand it. And that's a really good exercise. And just the fact of preparing the pitch deck is a perfect exercise. Like with RemotePass, we started with the pitch deck before we started building the product. The second thing is that the 3 common questions that come up when you talk to investors. So you always have like certain questions that come up in every discussion. And again, like, because you're in it 24/7, you have all the arguments in your head. And sometimes if you just say it the way you have it stored in your memory, it might not make sense to whoever you're talking to. It's good to practice with the first 2 or 3 first to find out what are the questions that they're all asking and write down the answer. I mean, you don't have to memorize it, but just writing it down in simple words.
It structures your thoughts.
Exactly. So that's the purpose of the first 2-3 conversations with investors. And and the last part is to make sure you condense it in a short period of time and say, okay, the next 30 days, I'm only going to focus on maximizing my meetings with investors. So hopefully I get everything done by 30 days so I can go back to work on the product and what I like to do.
Walk me through when you look at your journey, what have you learned so far about the whole journey of entrepreneurship outside of fundraising, maybe other elements that you're like, okay, you said, for example, you were a solo founder, now you're like a co-founder.
Yeah.
In your journey, is there anything that you can share? Because I appreciate your insights on quite a few levels. Like, you're good with product. I think you have a lot of depth in that domain. And obviously, you said at some point you were a customer service rep for your first company. So what are the learnings that you take if you're talking to a founder today who's at the idea pre-seed, seed stage, thinking about these things?
In my case, I'm not sure if it applies to every company, but in my case, I'm a product person. I love working on the product. And that is why I chose a company that has a heavy focus on product and technical, and especially in B2B and even in B2C as well. So in B2B, you really have to know the product inside out. It's not just one of those things you give it to somebody else and you work on a different thing. I mean, that's what you're selling. You're selling a product. So you really need to make sure that you're heavily involved. You understand the product inside out, and you need to speak to clients. I mean, it's just you cannot do without. We thought about every single thing, every single scenario, and all of these things. The product is great, and then you speak to client. Until now, I still do onboarding sessions myself, and I've decided to do the first 40 onboardings. So we have it written down, like the first 40 client onboardings. I'm gonna do them myself, simply because like every onboarding session, I learn something. Every onboarding session, I find a bug, I learn something about the UX that's for me because I'm used to the product, I don't see it, and I take it back to the tech team, and then they would fix it right away. And then I follow up with the client myself, and they're just so impressed. And that's what helps us improve the product and build something that's really cool.
What makes RemotePass interesting that you're building it in this part of the world?
When you look at the Middle East, like for us, when we had a lot of debate whether to go with this idea or not. And then we said, okay, when you think about remote work, what comes up first? Remote work is great, and then we can go crazy and hire people all over the place, but you cannot. I mean, you need to collaborate with these people. So when you hire someone, you really need to make sure that the person is within the 3-hour time difference. So basically, when you look at the map and then you draw a 3-hour time difference, I mean, that's going from Morocco to China. I mean, that's huge. So that's what got us excited about this opportunity. I said, okay, the companies here, they're not looking to hire someone in the US. Like you would never be able, even East Coast or West Coast, you would never be able to collaborate or get a productive call with someone in that part of the world. They're not looking at Latin America. So for us, if we build something here, it would be great because we're going to focus on remote team members in these places, and then we're going to provide them with services that they don't usually have access to. So we're going to build financial solutions. We're going to offer them insurance, pension, all of those things that you don't have access to, that someone in the US easily has access to. So we want to bring those services and benefits to remote team members in these countries.
I like that idea. So the basically the size of the market was expanded when you take that 3-hour time difference.
Exactly.
It makes it a really attractive spot. Man, I have many more questions, but okay. So if I was to ask your team, what would they say about you as a leader? What's your best trait as a CEO?
Impatient, maybe.
Best trait is impatience. Huh? Okay. Okay.
Oh, best trait. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe that I'm human. So I would listen.
Okay. Good listener.
So good listener.
Human, like maybe empathetic kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now when you think about success for you as a human, not necessarily as a RemotePass, what do you think that looks like when you look back at like 10 years from now and you say, okay, this is what success looks like? Because it's different for each individual. And it could be family related. This is not a professional question, just a human question.
To have built something that has impact on the lives of others.
Okay, so now when you look at motivation and stuff, like what makes you stay motivated?
What keeps me motivated? What keeps me motivated is the impact, like really on a daily basis when seeing people want to use the product or they don't want to use it for what reason. That challenge to improve things on a daily basis, that's the challenge is my motivation.
Okay, interesting. So basically solving people's problems on a daily basis is kind of like the driving force. You're a natural problem solver. Sounds
absolutely.
Last question. Thanks, by the way, Kamal, for all of the patience even though you said you're impatient. You're very patient today, What's your biggest fear in general? Could be in business or life as well. Sorry, I go deep at the end, man. I go deep at the end. I mean, these are really interesting subjects to me because they open up a whole. It's very, very internal. It's very personal. Sometimes people don't spend time really thinking about it. Okay, how do you approach fear of failure? Does fear of failure ever come to you?
I mean, you have fear and you deal with it differently as you grow.
Yeah.
Like fear back in the first company and the failure, like the way you deal with it was different, like the first year, and the way now how we deal with it, it's completely different.
What have you learned in that process?
Yeah, I mean, just to step back, take a moment, think about it, not just rush into decisions, and but really just step back and think it through. This is something that I've learned. And before, in my previous startup, I would freak out and I would just leave the office and sit in the car for for hours, just freaking out, but not thinking it through, but just panicking about what everyone would think. So
living in the fear, and this one is observing the fear.
Now you get used to it after so many years. You just get used to it and you deal with it differently.
Man, I love your journey, dude. Thank you so much for sharing. I know I have hundreds of other questions, but we'll leave that for another time. But thanks, Kamal, for sharing everything.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you were able to take away some valuable insights on this episode. Subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast listening app, and please don't forget to leave us a review and share it with your friends. The Middle East has a new story to tell, and this is From MENA to the World.